So, recently I conducted and made a video over a survey about your dream Fallout games. In it, I read through a number of ideas and desires that was submitted to me. Some of you guys wanted me to go over some more. So, here are 3 more Fallout fan game ideas. Now, in the prior video, I simply summarized the ideas and presented them more or less as is. This time, however, while the basic synopsis will still be the feature, I'll also give some of my own personal opinions on the matter, perhaps with some suggestions, thoughts, and overall feel of the idea. Of course, that's not to say my own opinions are absolute truths or even the best for a fictional narrative, but I feel like I should try to be a bit more evolved than just, here it is. Indeed, you as a viewer may have your own interpretation and ideas, and the author may choose to reject any and all suggestions. That is their right as the author. Now let's begin. We'll start off by discussing LJ-RnD's Seattle-based game. LJ begins with a dramatic narration for the Great War. He describes pre-war Seattle as being potentially the most advanced city in America, having been burned out by Chinese spies and rebuilt by the Enclave in their own design. Featuring a strong amount of automation and railways, Seattle was intended to be a trade hub. However, its economic prowess was halted by the resource wars. He wants the pre-war Seattle to seem idyllic on the surface but rotten underneath. He lists a number of minor factions. Enclave and the California Brotherhood would be featured, but play very small roles. There will also be a group of ghouls operating a pre-war naval base, but the ships won't move until the player intervenes and completes a number of quests. He compares them to something like the Boomers in New Vegas, with their whole airplane questline. Moving on to the major factions, LJ lists 4 of them. He also displays statistics that rank 1 from 5, 5 seeming to be the highest stat. These are population, technology, popularity in the region, and military strength. There's the Tacoma Supermutants, who are remnants of the Master's Army. Some of them fled north and took up residence in an incomplete vault. They refurbished it and crushed a tribe. They subjugated descendants of some vault dwellers, but these subjects rebelled and sealed themselves up in their own vault. The mutants are trying to get aside, believing there to be a GEC or FEV, just something to help them thrive in the area. They're unsurprisingly unpopular, with decent technology and also decent numbers. But their combat experience, being powerful veteran soldiers, give them the mightiest military in the region. Next is the Great Ghoul Horde, and Horde is right. These ghouls were not created from nuclear bombs, but rather a nuclear reactor that malfunctioned and pumped radiation in the surrounding area, ghoulifying the Tri-Cities. These ghouls built a civilization and proceeded to warmonger. They crushed tribes, and from the sounds of it, ghoulified some captured prisoners, all in a zealous religious frenzies for the worship of this reactor. That said, now it's breaking down and will soon cease pumping radiation into the ground. This is a problem for this society. The author notes that if it's non-operational, they cannot make new ghouls. I'll add too that given this group is a warring one, the reactor breaking down is extremely problematic. Radiation has healing properties for these ghouls. Wounded soldiers will not simply be able to return home and heal themselves. Naturally, they're looking for something to fix it. They don't have much in the way of popularity, military strength, or technology, but they have numbers. They are a horde, after all. The Bellingham Shogunate was built upon a modified Japanese ancestral tradition. It's a kingdom with a shogun, and samurais dressed in power armor, ready to do battle. Bellingham was turned into New Tokyo. They have expanded to Seattle and engaged in an unpopular war. A counterculture has formed aiming to stop the war, as well as the rigid, reformed Japanese culture that was adopted by this group. The author notes that he hasn't really thought this group out too well. They have a decent population, technology, and is rather popular in the region, though they're not necessarily as powerful military-wise. Neo Cascadia is essentially the NCR of Seattle. They have a prime minister, a senate, government corruption, but is liked by the public due to the safety that they provide. Unlike the NCR, they are quite the isolationist country, but due to their food shortages, are looking to expand. Large population, good amount of technology, and overwhelmingly popular, but the military might isn't too terribly impressive. As for gameplay, LJ just wants a more refined settlement building system. Now my own thoughts. I like a lot of the factions shown, in particular the Ghoul Horde. I'm usually rather biased in favor of the Super Mutants most of the time, but the wandering, warring Ghoul Horde that basically consumes towns and heals themselves at home, doing everything in religious zeal with crusading and forced conversion is just disgustingly gruesome. I imagine this is a bit of a joke about zombie movies, hordes that eat everything in sight, turning more and more into them. Of course, these ghouls seem like they're still sane, or at least capable of thought and reasoning. I also like the idea of a Republic versus Kingdom, and it's actually something I kind of wondered if New Vegas should have done over what the Legion turned out to be to help make them a bit more morally gray. On the subject of the Kingdom, I think an interesting idea would be to really go down the feudal ramp. Perhaps mix elements of European and Japanese feudalism together in a bit of a confused manner. Land ownership could be a good way to have a lord want to get a little bit rebellious against their government. Dive into the feudal politics a bit. Honestly, I feel like there should have long been a faction built on feudalism. Weird we haven't seen one yet, unless you count the Nuka World Raiders, I suppose. But maybe I've been playing too much Mountain Blade. Now, moving on, we have Snow, FrostBorne's Canada-based game. Snow states that his Fallout would actually be an anti-war satire, and the plot moves forward without the player's intervention. A few years after Fallout 4, an expedition set to the northern lands of Canada forms. This venture is headed by a joint initiative from both the Blue Ridge Caravan of Fallout 76 and the Crimson Caravan, originally featured in Fallout 1, but also featured in New Vegas. These two form the Crimson Ridge Caravan, and that faction contracts the protagonist, an experienced cartographer, to lead the journey. Naturally, not everything is what it seems on the surface. The themes revolve around questioning whether using nukes for safety despite the problems that they cause is a good idea. What happens when you send a young and impressionable to war, and how war is a spiraling problem of destruction and devastation. Hatred fueling hatred, and the past not being done yet with their war despite the nations being long dead. A proxy war is constantly fought under the old banners, and the game practically begs the player to put an end to the madness. Snow also gives more details regarding his gameplay mechanics. On the surface, it's essentially Fallout 4, but with more base building over settlement building, and keeping the voice protagonist, though with subtle, passive marks based on karma. In addition, he'd have a better reputation system, and gives the example of raiders being less hostile to you if you're known for wiping factions off the map. He'd also have a faction that you create and run, and not with just a Minuteman style general. In addition, he would want less ammo, more viable melee, and having two classes of gear, salvage versus pre-war. Salvage, able to be put together cheaply, but prone to breaking down, and pre-war being higher quality and requiring less maintenance. So, I generally like the caravan focus idea. The expedition of treading into unknown territory is rather appealing. I do question Blue Ridge and Crimson Caravan coming together. They are on the opposite end of the coast after all. But that being said, the Blue Ridge Caravan really only appeared in the Wastelanders update for 76, which takes place long before even the original Fallout, so there's no reason they couldn't have moved their operations heavily westward over the years. And the Crimson Caravan's original interpretation basically displays them as psychopaths that would take any crazy job for money. Assuming they have any of those values left over, the Blood-Soaked Caravan would take up such a risky job. Regardless, while I do think the story would need a proper reason for the two caravans to come together, the Crimson Ridge Caravan has a lot of potential for interesting internal stuff happening. A lot of backstabbing from management from the original caravan companies, the regular employees being unsure what to do in this new place, and general anxiety swallowing the group. As for gameplay mechanics, it might be cool to pull off a third tier of loot, freshly manufactured weapons. If we're including the Crimson Caravan, or at least a handful of people that broke off the Crimson Caravan, some gun runners may want to join and be a weapons development company for this new land. Maybe a few are bored with the safety of the NCR, or just hoping to strike it rich elsewhere. Regardless, these guys plan to set up shop at some point, perhaps mid-game, and can sell very high quality but very expensive gear. Finally, we get to the last idea for this video. It was sent by someone who hasn't given their name, but it's another New Orleans game. I read a lot of them set in New Orleans for some reason. Anyway, there are two large factions, the Republic of Texas, marching eastward, and the Kingdom of Dixie, a slave nation loosely based on the Confederacy. New Orleans itself is a haven for a small group of pre-war jazz musicians. Perhaps they were cryogenically frozen, or self-ghoulified like Eddie Winter. Though, while they are a haven for musicians, they are very harsh in punishing those who speak out against the administration. The Enclave originally ruled the area, but between the rebels and soldiers of the Republic, they were defeated. Each of these groups can be sided with. Dixie's line of quest involves having to sabotage the Republic bases, killing New Orleans leaders, and possibly destroying or absorbing the Enclave. The Republic's line is focused on securing the area and wiping out the minor factions. They'll have to destroy the Enclave, but can either annex or destroy the New Orleans leaders. The New Orleans quest is about building up the military power of New Orleans, as well as cleaning up the Mississippi River and wiping out raiders and dangerous wildlife directly around them. The Enclave would have to be destroyed. The Enclave is a bit more involved. Their questline would be based around sabotaging everyone else by having you do things like dump a modified version of FEV into the Mississippi River to wipe out New Orleans. The final battle would be between the Republic of Texas and the Kingdom of Dixie, if you sided with either of those two, or New Orleans, or between the Republic of Texas, the Kingdom of Dixie, and the Enclave if you sided with the Enclave. The player is a vault dweller from a control vault. However, after leaving the vault, they get attacked and nearly killed by raiders. The player survives and is healed by a doctor from a nearby town. He also describes the gunplay as being similar to 4 and 76 while having New Vegas' ammo variety and utilizing damage thresholds, with an optional settlement system. Now in general I do like some of this. I said it before, but I kind of wonder how New Vegas would have been if it featured the NCR fighting a kingdom rather than Caesar's all-consuming slaving legion. And interestingly, this does put that idea into practice. Kinda, perhaps a bit more than I expected. I feel there's a lot of significant overlap between this story and New Vegas' story. A republic marching eastward, fighting a large slaving state, with the option to side with either one of them or the leaders of a city that has a specific niche that exploits, in this case, music rather than gambling, right down to being taken out by raiders and healing up by a doctor. Mind you, the Enclave being a major faction that you can join does change the formula up a little. That said, I did like what I read in regards to siding with the New Orleans leaders, how they want you to take care of raiders and dangerous wildlife, cleaning up a river. It gives a bit of a different flavor compared to siding with House or Yes Man. That's not to say it's a bad narrative, especially given the presentation might be vastly different, but on paper there's a number of overlaps that definitely sticks out. And that was 3 fan-submitted ideas. I wasn't really sure about doing this, but hey, some sounded like they were interested, so I did give it a little bit of a go. In some ways, this is a bit of a test run to see if there's more interested in these type of videos. You guys have a good one.